Hi everyone. A very good morning to today's Q&A session. I have with me Samir Dua. Thank you, Samir, for joining us on this very interesting, I would say, intellectually stimulating Q&A topic. Uncovering leadership, learnings from the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita, as we all know, is a life-changing book where a narrative framework of a dialogue between a confused Arjuna and a charioteer Krishna, who gives him guidance, is set. Two prominent leaders from the epic Mahabharata. And who else to talk about this particular topic other than Samir Dua, who's been doing a lot of work in this area. And with Samir this morning, who's a leadership coach and a well-known book author with about 27 years of experience in the management and the leadership education space. He's working on this interesting area of generative leadership and how an individual has choice in what he or she creates in life. Now, about 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to review one of his best-selling leadership books called Become for Business World, and we've been in touch since then, and it's something really interesting every time you pick up a phone and talk to him. Samir is the founder of the Institute for Generative Leadership, where they offer a free live webinar every week. I'm going to put up this link at the end of the session, where they talk about lessons for leadership from the Bhagavad Gita. They run this live every Thursday in the evening, and people from 23 countries have been logging in. And I encourage most of you to log in and have a chance to look at this as well. Samir is also the founder of the Gift Your Organ Foundation, a charitable trust set up in February 2011 for organ donation. Thank you, Samir, again for joining me in this Q&A. I hope really we can do justice to understanding your perspectives of this topic in a short span of time.
Thank you, Pawan, for having me here. It's an honor and a delight to be talking to you, and more so because we are talking about the epic Bhagavad Gita. Can we do justice to the Bhagavad Gita? Perhaps not. Can we hopefully add some value to the viewers? Let's try our best. But the Bhagavad Gita is an incredible manual, and this, we've been doing. I've done over 30 sessions on this. A long way to go before we can do any, minuscule justice to it. But let's have some fun together.
Sure. Okay. So I've been reading quite a bit of it. In fact, after I had this conversation with you about a fortnight ago, I kind of buried myself more in it, and I realized that to do or not do, in fact, that's exactly how the Bhagavad Gita begins. It begins with, I believe, a dilemma and a lack of understanding the roles and responsibilities. And I think Krishna kind of comes in, he rather empowers Arjuna to make his life's choices. One of the issues that Lord Krishna emphasizes to Arjuna is the issue of leadership. And in every chapter that you pick up, in every verse you pick up, there is this, somewhere subtly mentions, different leadership principles. And in every chapter, if you carefully analyze, there are these interesting references to the quality of leadership. And I think that's why I'm curious to know more about it. What are your views broadly? And since you've been doing this from a theoretical perspective, but to apply this in today's world, what has been your experience over the last 3 or 4 months that you've been talking to leaders, especially on this topic?
Yeah, so first of all, I've been talking about this for the last 2 years now. But before that, I'll talk to your specific question. But before that, let me just talk about what Mahatma Gandhi spoke about the Bhagavad Gita not too long ago. And it's fascinating. Mahatma Gandhi said, every time disappointment stared me in the face and I had nowhere to go, I picked up the Bhagavad Gita and a verse here or a verse there, and I had a smile on my face and I found my answer, right? So here's a manual which is 5,000 years old, and here's Mahatma Gandhi, less than 100 years ago, was referring to the Bhagavad Gita to resolve some of his, massive challenges. And he said, a verse here or a verse there. Is this relevant to us today? Incredibly relevant to us today. The Arjuna disposition, the Arjuna posture is the posture, you just have to open your eyes and look around and you'll see so many people with the Arjuna posture where they are disempowered. The posture is that of a disempowered leader, right? The other thing about, when we talk about the Bhagavad Gita as a leadership manual, for me, what is leadership? Leadership is about leading a life, right? What do you do with your life? You don't run your life, jog your life, crawl your life. You lead your life, right? So for me, leadership and life, there's almost the same thing. So Bhagavad Gita is a life manual, and it tells you how to effectively and powerfully lead your life, right? So that's my two bit right now as an introductory. uh, Look around you and you'll see people who need to pick up the manual, read a verse here or verse there, and open up a new way of looking at life.
Right. So let me begin something which is more little broader, and I think I'll funnel it down as we talk. Many contemporary leadership topics, be it emotional intelligence, situational leadership, character, integrity, and you spoke a lot of them, were already discussed, right? Like you said, thousands of years ago. And these topics were discussed in a philosophical context. As management science we know today did not kind of exist then. But given the leadership models that we're also talking about, what are you seeing in the current new normal, as they call it?
You know, I ran a business school for 21 years. I ran colleges in India and the UK, and we spoke about management and we spoke about leadership and the distinction between management and leadership. And then you go. So let's start with spirituality, and then comes philosophy, and there's thin lines between there. You see Vyasa as a philosopher, right, who's written this incredible text, and then there's leadership, and then there's management, and there's thin lines in some of these, right, and then. Uh, uh, how people led their lives back in the day, they looked at what was righteousness, they looked at dharma, they looked at certain boundaries within which they had to make their decisions, and those apply today too. When you look at leadership, you look at leadership from the lens of what will take care of my care, what will take care of the care of my team, what will take care of the care of my manager, what will take care of the care of my organization, and what will take care of the care of my customer, and what will take care of the care of my shareholders and other stakeholders involved. And you've got to find that way to do things that's going to take care of multiple cares of different stakeholders.
Right.
But I talk to thousands of people and I ask them, the foundational question of leadership, and that's the foundational question of the Bhagavad Gita, not in the words I'm going to ask you, but it's a foundational question of life, right? The question is, what do you care about, right? And I ask these questions to leaders, and you get blank faces. I don't know what I care about. Okay. So the first question is, what do you care about? The second question is, are you taking care of what you care about? And the look you get, and it's me too. I'm not blaming anybody. This is the blindness of the culture we live in. I have so many of my own blindnesses, right? So what do you care about? Are you taking care of your cares? And if you are not taking care of your cares, what are you doing? When you wake up in the morning, when you jump into action, if you're not taking care of your cares, what are you doing? Right? So the Bhagavad Gita keeps bringing you back to get aligned with your cares. Because harmony in life can come through only when you are taking care of your cares. Only when you're taking care of the cares of your manager, when you're taking care of the cares of your organization. When your organization's cares and your cares are not aligned, there's going to be disharmony. You don't need the Bhagavad Gita to say this to you, but the Bhagavad Gita says this very powerfully, right? Harmony in life, rhythm in life is a function of alignment of cares. But to bring in alignment in cares, the first step is to be aware of what the cares are, right? And without that, what's going to happen? We're going to talk about things like emotions, because I'm in a disempowered emotion. Why am I in a disempowered emotion? Because my cares are not taken care of. Look at emotions, right? Whenever your emotion is disempowered, you're angry, frustrated, overwhelmed, resigned, resentful, it is because your care is not taken care of. It boils down to fundamentals. And the power of the Bhagavad Gita, it is all about fundamentals. So I'm going to sum this piece up, Pawan, and feel free to ask me any follow-up questions
Sure.
if I have. But
Sure.
those of you who are watching this, my question to you, and I ask this question in almost every session when it's an introductory session,
Right.
what do you care about? Till you don't answer this question, you're in drift. Because then you are waking up and you're in drift. To bring in design in your life, the first question you have to answer is, what is your care? What do you care about? Are you taking care of your cares? And what's missing such that you can start taking care of your cares? That's the fundamental of the Bhagavad Gita and of leadership. I'll take a
Right.
pause there, Pawan. Am I making sense? What's
Yeah.
going on?
So when you relate this to an organization, I think when people find, the founders come together, they always talk about the purpose, the vision, the mission. Why am I wanting to start a company, and then what is the problem I'm trying to solve? So if I put it in the context of an individual, is that what you're also saying, that if I know what I want to do, like if I know what I care and I can really do something to do that, is that a start point? Is that where you think most leaders can be successful if they think of that?
Yeah. Yes, to a very large extent, yes, but there's a distinction here, and this distinction is critical to understand, right? Why do I use the word care? And when I say this is the framework of generative leadership. Why do we use that word care? When your cares are taken care of, there is meaning in life. When your cares are taken care of, there's value in life. When your cares are taken care of, there's joy in life. When your cares are taken care of, there's satisfaction in life. When your cares are taken care of, you're empowered. And the opposite is also true. When your cares are not taken care of, there's no meaning, there's no
Yeah,
joy, value, satisfaction, you're disempowered. Now,
absolutely.
I can claim that I have a certain purpose, right? I can design a purpose and say that's my purpose. But is that purpose inside of your care? And how do you answer that question? Right? Is my purpose fully inside of something that is of value, meaning for me? Right?
Right.
I see people talking about purpose and they fulfill that purpose, and yet there's no meaning, joy, value, and satisfaction in their life. So there's a distinction. Your purpose has to be inside of a care. Now the question is, how do I know what my care is? You
Yeah.
answer that question by listening into your body, by going deeper internally and seeing whether there's satisfaction, whether there's joy, right? Otherwise, you could be chasing purposes, and
Right.
you might be one of those incredible guys that could even fulfill your purpose, and yet there's no meaning, joy, and value. So when you understand purpose, you understand dharma, right? What's my dharma, right? And that's the connection. I'm not going to go very deep there, but that's how you look at it from the Bhagavad Gita lens. Am I making sense, Pawan?
No, absolutely. I think given that we are now almost 4 months into lockdown, what you said is so true, because it is a time for self-reflection. I mean, you need to sit down, think through what you really want to do. And I think all of us are currently in that, I guess, the transition that you said. It's just so beautiful the way you put it. But going on, if you actually analyze today's circumstances, the genesis of it lies in our, I would say, inability to understand and live through this profound truth that you spoke. Be it individuals, kids, so-called leaders, are not able to accept the fact that life is that roller coaster ride, right? What are your views on that?
When I was a young boy, I hated roller coasters. I was very scared of roller coasters. Uh, So when somebody tells me life is a roller coaster ride, I automatically like, oh no, man, I don't want a roller coaster ride. I hate roller coaster rides, right? So they churn my tummy and then they give me the fear of. Uh, so remember, life is a roller coaster ride is an interpretation. Life is life. Life is what it is, and life is not what it is not. It is it. That is what it is. Now, we as human beings have interpreted it as a roller coaster ride. We'll have some ups and we'll have some downs, and that's what a roller coaster does. There's an up and then there's a down. Life is what it is, and it is not what it is not. And when we get see, when you talk about the profound truth, I always wonder what is the profound truth. As a human being, and this is what the Bhagavad Gita tells us, right? As human beings, we are one observer of life. Because we observe the life the way we observe the life doesn't mean the way I observe is the truth. It's just one way to observe the life, right? And that's one view of life. And there are 7 billion views of life if you look at the population of human beings, if you look only at human beings, right? But there's just one view of life, right? And what is the profound truth? Just because 100,000 of us agree on some fact of the world, that life is a roller coaster, does that make it the truth? Perhaps not. I don't know the answer. I rather live in the question, right? Life is what it is. Life is not what it is. My organization is what it is. My organization is not what it is not. My wife is who she is. My wife is not who she's not. My reportees are who they are. They're not who they're not. Now, I add my meaning to each one of them. Now, this is critical. All of you listeners, viewers, the meaning that I add to my spouse, to my company, to the market, to the lockdown, to my reportees, to my customers, the meaning that I add will give me my actions. My actions come from the meaning I add, right? So when I say my customer is painful, okay, thank you for telling me how you are seeing your customer. Your customer is who your customer is. Your customer is not who your customer is not. But when you construct your customer as painful, you have told me how you interact with your customer. Full stop. So the foundation of that is to go back and reconstruct. And, the foundation is to recognize the profound piece of the Bhagavad Gita, is to recognize that the view of life that I have is just one view of life. And the concern is, I have a view of life which I have constructed, which does not work for me. If I have a view of life that I have constructed and it doesn't work for me, then the question is, why are you constructing that view of life? How about constructing a whole new different view of life? And when you construct a whole new different view of life, you open up a whole new different set of possibilities.
Right. So you spoke about, so there is basically a perception that all of us have. What do you suggest that, so if you were to take away that lens and maybe replace it with another lens, do people need to look at it from a different perspective altogether? Change the lens itself, the way we're looking into life today.
Absolutely. We hold our lens as the gospel truth. We believe we know it, right? And the minute you bring in that arrogance that we know it, you've lost it, right? To navigate a child, right? And to accept the child the way the child is, to navigate that customer. Why is your reportee, who seems like a painful reportee, so disempowered? Because your reportee's care is not taken care of. Who's not taking care of the reportee's care? I have not taken care. It's me who's not taking care. So I'm not taking care of my reportee's care. My reportee is disempowered. Rather than listening to the care of my reportee and connecting with the care of my reportee and supporting that piece, what do? I very quickly create my truth. And my truth, which is my interpretation, my perception, my story, I say, that reportee sucks. Now, once I create that interpretation, I'm now not even bothering to listen to his care or her care. Or my customer, or my spouse, or my parent. We live in the world of answers. We have so quickly created our answers, and our answers are now our barriers to connection with people and to then taking care of what they care about. You take care of what others care about, magic happens.
Wow.
Right?
Absolutely.
But we are so committed to our answers in this world that we're not even. Somebody tells you that's your interpretation. And I do this all the time, and people tell me, "Somebody, come and live my life, and you'll know it." I said, "Okay, I hear you."
Oh, it's really powerful. I think it's really powerful, like what you said. And let me take this particular chapter, and that somewhere for me was also curious to know from you, to draw your attention to this dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna, chapter 6, the Dhyana Yoga. And if I take this verse 34 and 35, Arjuna actually speaks for all of us, and I guess because he talks about manas, the mind, which is restless, fleeting in different directions, moving from subject to subject. Very apt, powerfully, describes the whole characteristics of the mind, right? Given the current situation, and I'm coming back to this whole work from home, demands from work and family, challenges, the opportunities most professionals and all of us seem to be facing. How do you see this panning out? I mean, do you think individuals, let alone leaders, can all of us attain this balance somewhere, and move forward, maybe either in the right direction, like we said, is a perception again, but where do you think this whole thing is really looking at?
Yeah, Pawan, can I take some time to respond to this question? Because the paragraphs that you have alluded to are very powerful paragraphs. So, indulge in me, allow me to take some time to respond. Before that, let me just, for the sake of the viewers, read out. I refer to Swami Chinmayananda's copy of the Bhagavad Gita. So I'm going to refer to his translation of these paragraphs, right? So for the sake of the readers, this is what paragraph 34 says.
Right.
The mind verily is, O Krishna, restless, turbulent, strong, and unyielding. Make a note of these words, right? This is Arjuna asking Krishna, the mind verily is, O Krishna, restless, turbulent, strong, and unyielding. And then Arjuna adds, I deem it quite as difficult to control as the wind. And I'm going to come to paragraph 35 in a moment, but let me just talk a little bit about paragraph 34 because I think this is fantastic. First of all, you when you start the Bhagavad Gita and you see there's a shift taking place in Arjuna. There's an Arjuna who has this I know disposition. I already know disposition, right? And the I already know disposition comes from arrogance. Right, comes from I already know, I'm not ready. I get it that you're Krishna, that you're Lord Krishna, but I already know and I am right. Over here is Arjuna's question, where you see, if you read the whole Bhagavad Gita and go into the the hidden meanings, you can see a shift in Arjuna. Here is an Arjuna who's starting to be coachable. When we talk leadership, right? Here's an Arjuna who's starting to become coachable and ready. And how do you know these things? When you start to see how he's referring to Lord Krishna. He says, oh Krishna, right? And some of these have hidden interpretations that you got to understand. Now, what does he say? He says some very, very important words which are pregnant with deep meaning, right? He says, mind is restless, mind is turbulent, mind is strong, and mind is unyielding. What does that mean? It's restless because I don't know what I care about. So it goes from here. I'm working on something, my mind goes somewhere else. I'm working on something else, my mind goes somewhere else. I'm playing with my child, my office comes into my mind. When I'm in my office, my parents come into my mind. When I'm with my parents, my friend comes into my mind. Because I am not steady with, in this moment, what's my commitment to taking care of? So when I'm with my parents, am I committed to taking care of my parents in that moment? What care am I taking care of in this moment? Because I don't know that, right? And my mind is turbulent, right? It's restless. It's going from all over the place because I haven't brought forth. It's not that the mind is that. It's because that's what you have practiced historically. You got to bring it to practice, asking yourself the question, what care am I taking care of right now? So let's ask this question right now. What care are you taking care of right now when you're watching this video? What care are you taking care of now, Pawan? What care are you taking care of now, Sameer? Right? And this, Pawan requested me to come in for this conversation. It's right in the center of my care, of the work that I do. I want to talk to people like yourselves. So I am fully alive right now. I have nothing else in my mind, for example, right? So these words are powerful. Then what does Arjuna say? Arjuna says, the mind is strong and it is unyielding. You know what? It's just going back to the earlier piece, Pawan and you and I were speaking about. Once I make up an interpretation, I'm unyielding on that interpretation. I'm right. I'm right. I know I'm right. Right. And that I'm right is the starting point of my downward spiral. So Arjuna, in his coachable disposition, so humbly is telling Lord Krishna, please help me. This is what I see. And he also uses the metaphor of the wind. Right. I can't control the wind. So he's using it as difficult as to control the wind. How do you control the wind? So the metaphor he's using is that of the wind. So this is the beauty of being coachable. You go to your coach, you go to him or her with your deepest concerns and say, this is what I'm dealing with. Now, what does Krishna do? Let me read what Krishna says in paragraph 35 of this chapter, right? And this is the beauty, right? As coaches, those of you who are coaches, watching this Just see what incredible lens that Krishna brings in, right? He says, undoubtedly, O mighty armed. So again, in different paragraphs, Krishna refers to Arjuna differently. In this paragraph, he says, "O mighty armed." So there's a subtlety there, and I'll talk to you about that subtlety. Undoubtedly, O mighty armed, the mind is difficult to control and is restless. So what is he doing as a coach? First of all, he's addressed Arjuna as the mighty armed. He's acknowledged him, number one. He's built him up a little bit there. Number two, he's agreeing with Arjuna, right? And then he says, but, Krishna says to Arjuna, but by practice, O son of Kunti, now he refers to him differently, right? Now not as the mighty armed, but O son of Kunti, and by dispassion, it is restrained. So how do you restrain your mind? By practice and by dispassion. So let's decipher this, right? Can I make a claim and test this claim in your own way, right? The claim I'm making to you right now is you are your practices. You see Sri Ram standing like this. He's comfortable standing like this. That's why he's standing like this, right? If this is his practice, he stands like this. That's his, sits or stands. This is his practice. And chances are we don't even know that we don't know this is how we're standing in this moment, because my practice very quickly becomes my habit, right? And my habits apply to me, right? How I interpret the world is a practice, and it becomes a habit. And once I interpret the world in a certain way, historically, I've been doing this, right? I've been, practicing, interpreting the world in a certain manner. It's now my habit. It's now part of me. So I'm saying you are your practices. You want to shift yourself. You want to shift who you are. One interpretation is you got to shift your practices. I mean, of course, we can talk about many different interpretations only when I look at the Bhagavad Gita. I'm not even bringing in my leadership discourse view right now. But one view is to say that I have to shift my practices, because who I am is my practices, right? The way you're sitting right now, those of you, the way you're sitting right now is your practice. The way you're breathing right now is your practice. The way you see your manager is a practice. The way you see your reportees is a practice. And once you build that practice, you become strong and unyielding. How do you shift it? With practice, right? This is the key. There's a big distinction, and I want to bring that out over here. Pawan has given me time to speak on this paragraph, and I want to make the most of this, right? There's a big distinction over here, right? What's the distinction between knowing about and knowing, right? So let's talk about, let's take swimming, right? Something which is very common and simple, or even dancing, or even driving, or cycling, or anything, right? Any skill. Swimming. Those of you who are watching this video, do you know how to swim? Some of you may say yes, some of you may say no, right? Let's say you don't know how to swim, right? The ones who don't know how to swim. What is it about swimming? It's so simple. Just jump into the water, lie down flat, flap your hands, flap your feet, manage your breathing, and that's it. Right? That's all there is to swimming. It's not much to swimming. But try doing this. Try doing swimming. And those of you who don't know swimming, you know what I'm talking about. Just going into the water is the difficult part, right? So, that's the difficult part, right? The only way to learn swimming is through jumping into the water and doing it. Swimming cannot be learned by reading a book. The way to learn swimming is by going into the water and doing it, and failing and failing and failing and failing, and the water going into your nostrils, and you almost feeling like dying in that moment. But the only path to learning swimming is that path. The only way you can learn cycling is not through reading a book, by doing it. The only way you can learn kathak or ballet or negotiation or managing a team or strategy is by doing it, by building a practice. To live here, and I say this to you very respectfully, I ran a business school for 20 years, right? Teaching people academic knowledge about what strategy means. Yes, academic knowledge is critical, but it's like reading how to swim. Learning strategy in a business school is learning how to swim in a business school. It has its power. You get the knowing about, but the knowing happens when you jump into the water. But the problem is we don't jump into the water. So those of you who are in the question of, my mind is so wavery and all of that, because that's your practice. You want to shift your mind, you've got to commit to a new practice. And I want to give you that practice. Ask yourself a question 20 times a day, 10 times a day, 3 times a day. Put out a reminder. What do I care about? Am I taking care of what I care about? Right? And in this moment, what care am I taking care of? Just as a small one practice. I mean, we could talk about 100 different things, right? And I talk about so much. Let's talk about one thing. How about putting out a reminder on your mobile phones, or putting up post-its? Or, we've got people who've got their password. What do I care about, for example? Every time they go to their computer, am I taking care of my care? Get connected to yourself. Get deeply connected to your teams. Get deeply connected to your organizations by building a practice of putting your attention there. It's a game of practice. You are your practices. You want to shift who you are, you've got to shift your practices. And remember, shifting practices takes effort. Thank you for your indulgence.
So, really, really interesting, Samir. And when you talk about practices, many habits and practices in the current situation, the last 4 months have kind of drastically changed. Work is no more work. It's become a part of life. There's nothing called 9 to 5. How can leaders especially make practice more consistent? And my question is, it's a very mundane habit, but how do they move it into behavioral change, like you said, over a period of time? How do they make it a habit day in and day out? And you said practice, but I want to know more about it. How can they make it, a change that can really happen for them?
Yeah, let's understand this a little better, right? I have a behavior as an individual, and my organization has a culture, right? How do I shift it? How do I shift my behavior? And as an organization, I'm a leader, and I want to shift my, just the culture of my whole organization. What is culture? Culture is practices of the team, right? That's the culture. The culture of the organization is integrity, because we have a practice of doing what we say we will do. For example, the culture of this organization is responsibility, because we take ownership, for example, right? So that's the leader who's got the larger organizational responsibility. Let's come down to as an individual, because you're talking about behavior change, right? Let's understand this, right? My practices, when I do them consistently, shift my habits. My habits shift my behavior, right? My behavior, when as a group it's shifted, you shift your team as a group, their behavior, you shift the culture of the team. Right? You want to shift the culture of your organization, you've got to ask yourself, what's that practice? What's that doingness? It's not about, putting up cool posters on a wall of your office, right? It's not about cool. It's going right down to the fundamentals of what's the doingness as a practice, because practices shift habits, habits shift behaviors, behaviors shift the culture, right? So how do I question for you, right? What's the lockdown, right? We had this coachee. I had this coachee of mine who's a very senior HR guy in a very large organization. And he says, Samir, you know what? Life in the lockdown is so much more busier, and I'm starting my computer at 8 o'clock in the night, and at 11 o'clock, I still have things to do. At least back then, I would spend time with my family. My work-life balance is screwed up. And, I keep telling my manager this. And he was in this whole rant. Senior man. Right? What's missing? The practice of a rhythm is missing. Construct your rhythm. You know what? I commit to having lunch with my family between 1 and 2 and block your calendar. I have a practice of lunch 1 to 2 with my family. I have a practice between 4 and 4:30 or 4 and 5. I'm going to have tea with my family. I have a practice between 7:30 and 8:30. I'm going to take a dinner break. And I'm going to do that. Whatever time I need to spend with my family is a rhythm. You build it in. To say that my life is messed up because of the lockdown is to live in hallucination. The lockdown has done nothing to your life, right? You have not controlled how you're navigating the lockdown. What are your rhythms? Do you have a rhythm to speak to your children? Do you have a rhythm to speak to your parents? Do you have a rhythm to speak to your manager? Do you have a rhythm to speak to your reportees? If you don't have a rhythm to speak to them, no wonder life's chaos. I'm not surprised. You want to shift your behavior, you've got to distinguish what's that new rhythm of practice that you've got to initiate. And then you've got to commit to that rhythm of practice. And that's how you shift your behavior. Pavan, I hope really, I sometimes wonder, am I making, where am I going with this? Just tell me, is it making sense, my friend?
No, absolutely. I think you're making a lot of sense, because these are all the way that we are living life, and there are a lot of things that we do, and unconsciously we do it. And I think what you're saying makes so much of sense. So, obviously, one of the things when you talk about practice, and I see a lot of people even telling me that they carry a lot of baggage. Obviously, from what their managers did, they've learned it from that. They have seen people doing it. They've seen peers doing it, and there is a specific set of attributes which unconsciously get into them, and then they practice that, right? What is also important is, I believe, mindfulness. I mean, how do you look at these two? How do you make sure that you're taking away the baggage, at the same time you're practicing, and like you said, practicing mindfulness to be in the moment? Is there a way that people can do it? I know it's a very overwhelming thing, but how do you have somebody practice mindfulness to be here, with all the lockdown, with other issues going around?
Yeah. Uh, Again, your question is so fantastic, so loaded, so beautiful. Can I just talk about two different things?
Yeah.
One is, I'm not going to talk about the question you asked. I'm going to talk about something that you stated while you were coming to the question, because it is quite interesting. Right? And I'm hoping it'll add value to the lives of our viewers. Number one, people carry baggage, as you stated that, right? What's that baggage that people carry, right? What's that baggage? The baggage is your historical interpretations, that an interpretation that you made back in history, a month earlier, 2 months earlier, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, somebody did something, and you made up an interpretation, and you've lived with that interpretation for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years of your life. And that interpretation is your baggage.
Yeah.
Why is that interpretation a baggage? Because an interpretation that works for you gives you results. An interpretation that does not work for you, and you still hold that interpretation, that becomes your baggage, right? So you've got to go back to the fundamentals and understand, what baggage am I carrying? Is this my interpretation, or is this something which is the truth? This is a glass, right? This is a fact. Pavan sees a glass, I see a glass. This is not my interpretation. This is a glass. I mean, of course, at a spiritual level, when I go to the Bhagavad Gita, I will talk about this being my interpretation, but that's taking it to a whole different level, well outside leadership, into the domain of spirituality. So let's stay away from that for now. So that baggage is your construct. And this is where rigor comes in, right? The world, this is a critical piece, right? The world I see is not a function of what is out there. The world I see is a function of the way I see. The world I see is a function of the observer I am. The world I see is a function of the interpretations I create. So the baggage is a function of my interpretations. So I just wanted to clarify that as a follow-up to the piece, right? Yeah. Your second question around mindfulness, right? I keep stating this over and over again. What's that one? If somebody had to ask me, Samir, as a human being, what's that one true gift that we have? Right? And for me, my interpretation, this is my interpretation. This is not the truth. This is Samir's interpretation that I offer to you. You're welcome to accept it. You're welcome to dunk it, right? It's your call. But the true gift in my interpretation that you have is your attention, right? Let's do a quick exercise, all right? All of you who are watching this, do this. Please do genuinely, really do this, because that's when you get what I'm saying, right? Just put your attention on your breathing. Pavan, do that for me, please. Why don't we do this experiment with you? Put your attention on your breathing.
Okay.
Just nothing else, only your breathing.
Okay.
Yeah. Put your attention on your feet. Put your attention on your feet right now and feel the sensations on your feet. Just feel the sensations on your feet now. All of you who are watching this, do that. Shift your attention, put your attention on your shoulder and feel the sensations on your shoulder now.
Okay. Okay.
Put your attention on a problem that you have in your life right now. There's whatever problem, whoever that person is, put your attention on that.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Now, I have a question for you. When you put your attention on your breath, did your breathing become a wee bit deeper?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you put your attention on your feet, could you feel the sensations? And when you put your
Yeah,
attention here, and when you put your attention on a problem, what am I
yeah.
saying? Whatever you put your attention on grows. Energy
Mm.
follows attention. Energy follows attention. And I'm just showing you this in a very basic. People are putting their attention on lockdown sucks, and the lockdown
Mm.
becomes. We've sent so much energy to the
Yeah,
lockdown sucks, and it's become so big. And today, when somebody comes and says, "You know what? I've had a blast in this lockdown," they are not ready to believe that, because they've made lockdown suck so big, because for the last 5 months they've been putting their energy there, they've been putting their
yeah,
attention there.
yeah.
People's problems are so big because they've been putting their attention on the problem but not on the possibility. You put your attention on possibility, your possibilities become bigger. The question is, where do you choose to put your
Mm.
attention? And you have a choice in where you put your attention. But the problem is what Arjuna says: my mind is so restless, meaning what? My
Mm.
attention is so restless. It continues to waver everywhere.
Yeah,
So what you got to, so now what's the practice? Again, remember, it's all about practice. It's right
yeah,
going right back. What's the practice? The
yeah.
practice is to put your attention on your attention. Where is your attention right now? Ask yourself the question 10 times a day. Where is my attention right now? Why am I putting my attention that my wife is so painful, or my wife is not doing this, or my husband is doing this, or my husband is so painful, or my manager is so painful? Why am I not putting my attention on how do I navigate this challenge? Or how do I
Mm.
bring forth the possibility over here? Wherever you put your attention grows, and your life is an evidence of my claim.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, really profound. And I think the way you're saying it, it's so simply, beautifully put. But if you actually look at it, I'm sure it takes a crazy number of hours to absorb it, digest it, and actually put that attention, like you say. It's so overwhelming. So I mean, I've been following you, and you, like in the last 20-25 years, you put really your life out there, and your website is so beautiful. It talks about your journey, it talks about your books and all of that. Can you reference three big lessons from the Bhagavad Gita, that stayed with you specifically, and in turn, you want leaders of today's times to really absorb and implement?
Yeah, there are lots of big lessons in the Bhagavad Gita, and to put them in three is going to be difficult. But
I
I
know.
will put them in three because your specific request is three. So
Yeah.
let's play. But let's put it in three as a sum up of this conversation, right? So what have we spoken about? And let's put this down to three pieces, right? And see whether this could be of value to our viewers, rather than going all over the
Sure.
place on the Bhagavad Gita. Just sum
Yeah.
this conversation up with what you've asked, right? So number
Sure.
one, the first piece that the Bhagavad Gita keeps coming back. So let me just say something else, right? Bhagavad Gita talks about sin, right? What is sin, right? Sin is not doing something that is illegal, for example. It could be, I don't know,
Mm.
but it's not just that, right? Sin, if you deeply understand the Bhagavad Gita, it says when you're not taking care of what you care about, you are sinning. Because in this moment, you are paying the price of your sin. And the price of your sin is dissatisfaction, no joy, no value, no satisfaction. So hell and heaven are not geographical locations. Hell and heaven exist in this moment. When you take care of your care, there's heaven. When you don't take care of your care, there's hell, because you've sinned. That's what sin is as per the Bhagavad Gita. So what are the three profound lessons? Coming back to Pawan, my friend's question. Number one, what do you care about? To
Mm.
deeply understand this question, and this is not a final answer. This
Yeah.
is a question that you want to live with in life and play with it. Hold it with lightness, hold it with wonder, hold it with the exploration
Mm.
emotion, right? Yeah, man, what do I care about? How fascinating. And don't get overwhelmed. Oh, no, I don't even know what I care about. People get overwhelmed because they don't know what they care about. It's all
Yeah.
right. You've got to hold this with lightness. So the one big piece is, what do you care about, right? And once you've distinguished what you care about, are you taking care of what you care about, right? And how can you take care of what you care about? And always hold this with lightness. Don't go into guilt, because
Yeah.
why? just, this moment is the moment, right? So number one. Number two, observe your interpretations. Observe the lens through which you're observing your life.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm saying is not so straightforward, but it's powerful. Many people just do it because they hear it like this, right? Observe, keep asking yourself, is this my lens or is this a fact? Right? Is this a fact? Or is this, real? Because my manager is my manager. He or she is who he or she is. He or she is not who he or she is not. How am I constructing my manager? How are you constructing the lockdown? Pawan keeps alluding to the lockdown.
Yeah.
Observe your interpretation of the world you observe. That's number two. And number three, ask yourself the question, or build a practice of putting your attention on your attention. Right? And all of this I take from the Bhagavad Gita, and I learned from my lessons from leadership, of generative leadership, that I learned from the world of IGL as a student, and I see great similarities. So these are the three pieces that I offer to you, given what we've spoken up until now.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and I know the webinars that you do every week on Thursday, where you talk about leadership lessons from the Bhagavad Gita, and obviously from the generative leadership perspective. I think I would encourage all of them to attend, because that gives you a lot of insights into every chapter, into every quality attribute that you believe leaders should have. I'm going to put up the link in some time. But before we take a wrap, Samir, there are two questions that came in from our LinkedIn pages. And if you don't mind, I want you to address that very, very briefly. I know we are running short of time, maybe another 5 minutes, and I'll take one question. The first question is, from the Karma Yogi, neither insists that his will should prevail, nor does he detest when things go contrary to his liking, right? And like you said, there is that fine balance. What do you think leaders should do, especially in the workplace, to kind of generate that balance today, to like and dislikes, the complete opposites that we all see every day?
I'm not very clear. The balance between what do we have to create? I've just sort of clarify the question once again, please, Pawan.
So this person talks about, whether should I, everything that comes to me, I have this, a yes or a no. Either I say no to things that I don't like, a yes to things that I like. I always have a choice. So he's asking us, saying, how do you make that choice? How do you make that balance between choices, between a yes and a no today, especially in the workplace?
Yeah. We were in a conversation. I run a program called the Strategy Conversation. And we have this incredible, very senior man from the UK who was part of the conversation. And this was literally as recent as Wednesday this week. We are on Saturday today. This was on Wednesday this week. Okay. And this incredible human being says, I have never said no in my life. I don't say no in my life. And to recognize that when you do, what does no do? This is what I've learned from my teacher, Bob Hanham, right? A no opens up a space for yes. Every time you don't say a no, you close a space for a yes elsewhere, right? Because you're saying yes to everybody outside in the world, you are saying no to yourself, right? That's a path to disaster. So to answer the question, where do I say yes and where do I say no? Remember, a no, a decline is not to the human being. A decline is to the request that's been made. The culture that we live in, we have made declines personal. So we don't say no because, that person will feel bad. No, take care of that person when you say no. Make the decline specific to the request, not to the human being. Number one. Number two, where do you say yes and where do you say no? Which is why we go right back to the foundational question, does this take care of my care? It doesn't take care of my care, I'm not going to do it, right? My yeses will be inside of the domain of my cares. My no's will be those that don't add value, meaning, joy, satisfaction in my life is going to be a no, and that's going to be a respectful no. Is that the question, Pawan?
Yeah, exactly. So obviously he's talking about, I think this is what I also understand, that he's talking about choices. Given that there's so many things getting onto us, from morning to evening, every time I say yes, obviously I have more choices to make. I say no, I have more choices to make. So he wanted to know what is the balance at the end of the day. How does he make that balance happen?
Yeah. And the balance is going to. So remember, every choice you make has a payoff.
Yeah.
By committing to this 1 hour with Pawan today,
Correct.
right? I've said no to 100 different things. There's a choice made of a yes and many different no's every moment, right? Every yes means there's a many different no's, right?
Correct.
Which is why you choose the yeses, those that take care of what your cares are. So that's how I offer this to you, to the person who asked this question, Pawan.
Okay. The other question is a little more, I think, I would not say fundamental, but it's kind of really broad. This person is asking about, there are several leadership books today, and there are thousands of them that I need to buy. If I, go through the Bhagavad Gita once, will it be an answer to most of my leadership issues? I don't know how you want to answer this, but it's a very fundamental question, I believe.
Yeah. I'm an author, by the way, and I'm going to say something to you which is going to be detrimental to me. Okay.
Right.
But I'm going to still say it. I don't read books to gain just knowledge.
Okay.
Read books to shift your practices and habits and behaviors. So what you learn in a book, bring forth that in your life as a practice and as a habit, right? There are people who have read the Bhagavad Gita. There are people who could tell you what is, chapter 6, paragraph 34, paragraph 35, and they can rattle it out. But you look at their lives, they're not practicing it. So it's not about how many books you've read, right? It's about whether you've read that one book and you brought that into practice in your life. So is Bhagavad Gita the answer? Yes, indeed. But the answer is not in reading the Bhagavad Gita. The answer is fully understanding and bringing forth the practices of the Bhagavad Gita. Then this manual is incredible, right? So my worry, and I say this very respectfully, right? Really, please don't mind me saying this. Just reading a book and gaining knowledge will give you arrogance. When you build the practice, you will get skillful. And when you do the practice, you will bring in humility, because practice takes effort. And that's when you bring in humility. So that's what I offer to you.
I think it's amazing. Samir, I keep saying that I really don't know whether I did justice to this Q&A, because you've been doing this, like you said, for 2 years. There's just thousands of things to learn, and doing it in 45 minutes, I really don't know we did justice. But I have personally a few takeaways, and I believe people who are watching us, people who will watch us after the version goes on YouTube again, you would get questions. I'm going to address it to you again, but thank you so much for your time again. It's really profound, overwhelming to just have this conversation with you and go back and refer to some of those things that you said, and reflect it, and in the quiet mode, understand whether it really works or not. But thank you again, Samir. Pleasure to have you on the Saturday morning. Thanks for your time. It's lovely to have this conversation again. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pawan. Delightful being with you. Thank you, everyone who's joined us. Delightful. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend. Bye.